Hello, everyone. We have an incredible guest. Tendu Yogurtcu and I met, I guess it's been more than 10 years ago in Women in USA recognition. And we've been following each other ever since. She's the CTO of Precisely and very involved with artificial intelligence. So welcome, Tendu. Thank you so much for doing the podcast today.
Hi, Vicky. It's so great to be in this podcast with you.
Thank you. Well, tell me what you've been hearing and seeing from customers in terms of evolution of artificial intelligence.
When we look at the broader AI landscape, global venture funding in January alone, Vicky, as you are aware, approached $55 billion. And we have seen that continued multi-billion dollar raises and hyperscaler infrastructure investments that tells us AI is not going to slow down. It's accelerating at scale. However, the more interesting question is what happens inside enterprises, inside our customers, as that investment translates into deployment. And when I look at the enterprise AI right now, and when I have these conversations with customers, I see three major clear shifts. First, AI is moving from experimentation into production. That was a major shift happening. They are no longer isolated pilots. It's embedded into customer workflows, operational systems, and core business processes. And once you try to scale it in the real environments, integration challenges, data inconsistencies, and operating model gaps become very visible. You are very familiar with those. We
Yes.
have been in this space, and these challenges have been challenges in every big disruption that we have seen. In fact, Precisely and Drexel University's Lebow College of Business conduct an annual survey on data integrity and AI readiness trends. In the most recent 2026 survey, more than 40% of leaders still cite infrastructure or data readiness as major obstacles, even though most describe themselves as AI ready. So the gap becomes real when organizations move from proof of concept to enterprise scale. And the second shift is measurement and alignment are still immature. The level of investment going into AI is significant. In the same survey, we see 52% cite AI as the primary influence on their data programs, and 32% expect positive return on investment within the next 6 to 12 months, yet only 31% have tied AI initiatives to measurable KPIs. I'm sure you are experiencing this also, your interactions with the customers and enterprises. That creates a disconnect. AI initiatives are accelerating faster than the measurement frameworks, and many of the teams are struggling how to measure the business impact.
So scale and business impact are really critical right now. What should enterprises be doing? What are the questions do you feel they should be asking to develop these KPIs?
So there are a couple of different strategies, but there's also another shift that I am experiencing and witnessing. The third shift is autonomy raises the bar for data integrity. With agentic AI systems are becoming more autonomous and more independent, we see that the focus is shifting the quality and the context of the underlying data, and the data matter more than ever. If the data is incomplete, inconsistent, system will amplify that. In fact, the Lebow findings reinforce this. 51% cite data quality as their top integrity priority, and 96% invest in location intelligence and third-party enrichment. So how do we think about these? To your question, what do we do if we step back and ask what organizations should actually do to prepare for these shifts? I will focus on three priorities. First, invest in the data foundation before scaling AI. Because when AI moves into production, it reflects the quality of the data underneath it. In practice, that often means addressing fragmentation across systems. For example, we have seen situations where customers' data exists across CRM, billing, support platforms with inconsistent definitions. AI models trained on that data inherit those inconsistencies. And before scaling automation, organizations need clear ownership of critical data domains and alignment on definitions across these systems. Another thing with the data foundation becomes if you're an insurance company, and as an insurance company, you want to understand the updated property information, geographic risk factors, environmental catastrophic risk factors or prior claims history so that you can model what may happen and assess the risk before that blizzard hits, and also understand potentially the propensity of the buyers who are not insured and who are on the path of that blizzard as it hits different areas. So data really affects pricing, customer trust, and it impacts the financial outcomes. It is not just for model accuracy in this case. And then the second strategy is defining success before you scale. We have seen, and it was almost necessary to move the initiatives very quickly. We want to understand the art of the possible with agentic AI. We want to understand what we need to reimagine and redesign in the processes, not just layer AI on top of what exists. However, what makes the difference is defining measurable outcomes early. For example, if the goal is operational efficiency, measure cycle time reduction or cost per transaction before and after AI deployment. If the goal is revenue impact, track conversion rates or expansion within existing accounts. When metrics are explicit, AI becomes part of the business performance management rather than a parallel effort. And the third strategy is evolve governance alongside autonomy. We are seeing governance, data and AI governance as an accelerator to AI initiatives, especially in enterprises as organizations introduce higher levels of automation and agentic AI. Governance need to be part of the strategy and it has to mature with the technology. In the Levo survey, organizations with formal governance programs report actually significant higher trust in their data than those without governance.
Those are really important points. In your experience working with many customers, how do you get started? You want to put the governance programs in place, you want to clean up your data, but what is the first step in this whole process?
The first step is defining the scope small enough with a measurable outcome and iterate through that. Start small, identify the workflow or the process that you want to reimagine, redesign with agentic AI or AI, whichever methods fit best, and define that end state and iterate through that. Because the more outcomes we can show internally, that makes the case for the next use case. I think it's important to define the scope small, show the results, and then pick up the next use case, business case to demonstrate those outcomes.
A lot of the success depends not just on these processes, which you just defined, but people. Do you see recommendation around a specific group of people that's isolated, that's kind of working on AI initiatives? Or do you really see that as fitting into kind of the daily flow of the business and making it a part of everyday improvements?
That's a very critical question, Vicky. I think in early generative AI cycles, we have seen more people in the R&D teams or labs teams or broader engineering teams like sales engineering and services teams, support teams adopting AI. However, in order for an organization to have the business impact, we have to think this as a cultural transformation for the organization. In fact, in our case, Precisely's HR owns that AI at Work initiative and upskilling everyone in the company with the skills and the tools. It becomes very important because you cannot really think about embedding this to day-to-day workflows without bringing the skill sets of everyone. And you need everyone to understand how these tools or the almost like a different state of mind and mindset is going to help them in their day-to-day work and train them on those.
Yeah, that
Cultural
makes
transformation.
a lot of sense because a lot of data and it's the context, right? It's the subject matter expertise of people who've been doing this process day in, day out that we kind of need in order to re-engineer it or improve it and have the right data to know that the data is clean because, others that haven't worked with that data might not know what clean data looks like in that process.
And
How
I
do
think
yeah,
it's also ability to be efficient with the tools.
Yeah, and there's so many tools out there. We're constantly bombarded with different models, large language models out there from ChatGPT to Claude? Is there one that Copilot with Microsoft and Google Gemini, right? What is your company kind of pursuing? Or do you see people leaning in one direction or the other in terms of tools?
I think with the tools, every company has to make the decision for what the right tools for the business model the company has. Depending also on the use cases might be different. For R&D, you might be adopting something that integrates better with GitHub if everything is in GitHub. However, for product management, you might be running a pilot and comparing different tools to see what is going to be most effective for writing the epics, the user stories, or conducting the competitive intel search for the products. Instead of thinking about one tool versus the other, thinking about what will be the set of tools I should look at for user experience, for prototyping, for product management, R&D, go-to-market teams, and run a pilot and evaluate those. But when you run a pilot, it becomes very important to define the scope of that pilot, the time frame, let's say 4 to 8 weeks, whatever time frame that you have, and have daily, weekly check-ins with people to see how you are measuring the outcomes and comparing these different tools before you make a choice. And when we make a choice in this rapidly evolving technology cycle, we know that that choice is not static, right? Because in 2 months, something else is going to come and disrupt and will be better than what you chose potentially. So you have to also think about making this choice because these are my priorities and this tool gives me the best at this moment. But I want to also adapt this in a way I can future proof myself. So I can actually have this integrated into my ecosystem of AHA, Jira, GitHub, whichever way that you are looking, or Salesforce and the CRM systems that you might be using, and think about, will I be able to replace this with the next one when that happens to perform better?
So not only do you think about choosing a tool, but also the upgrade path and where will you go next. And it's so, with the changes, it's so hard to predict which direction it will move in. There's definitely bigger players, but do you see a move to small language model? We talk a lot about, generative AI and large language model, and people are familiar, but do you see, as enterprises clean up their data and hopefully have better governance in place, do you see them moving more towards small language model that are kind of protected within the enterprise?
We are seeing a move, and we have been talking about this for a while. The main drivers for that are, can you actually have better business outcomes by training these smaller models on domain-specific data sets?
Mm-hmm.
Because you might be a healthcare company with 25 years of healthcare data that your company owns, proprietary data. And in addition to that, your company's proprietary data, obviously for healthcare, they also bring third-party data for enrichment, which is very critical to create the context. Can you leverage the smaller language models which are trained specifically on those 25 years of historical proprietary data and the third-party data and have better business outcomes? So that's number one driver for that. Of course, number two driver is still cost. The cost is going to be more contained by doing that for a specific company or enterprise with their data and use those smaller models. But we are definitely seeing a shift towards that.
Yeah, I can see that happening more and more now, especially as enterprises will worry about security and trust being so critical. When you have healthcare data, you don't want it to be out there in, chat GPT for others to use, obviously. So, protecting the data becomes really, really important. As we kind of talk a little more about you personally, as you evolve in this space and your knowledge and learning, what are the ways that you get engaged with information? How do you progress in terms of your own learning and expertise?
Number one thing, I continue to not only read but actively work with these tools and try what is possible.
Yeah.
Because you want to experience. I may not be coding for 5-10 years now because I have been in leadership roles. However, you want to understand what cloud versus ChatGPT versus Perplexity can do for you,
Mm-hmm.
or how you can generate the quick prototype or website, even a video clip, because you start really training yourself and rethinking, redesigning, reimagining what this could change for your role, for your team's role, and for the industry as a whole. So get out there, work with the tools, learn the weaknesses, the strengths, and understand those. You need to understand the weaknesses also. Second piece is talking with colleagues like yourself, attending the roundtables with the CXOs, as well as talking with our customers, have been always a strength in terms of understanding what the shifts are happening in the market and how emerging challenges are going to create opportunities for us to innovate, because those emerging challenges, each of them become an opportunity. And finally, I see that AI is accelerating the move toward a more adaptive enterprise. Systems are becoming more responsive to real-time signals. That creates the potential for dynamic businesses, right? We have seen that over the last decade with dynamic pricing, predictive risk management, personalized customer engagement, hyper-personalized customer engagement, in fact, and more resilient supply chains in some cases. For me, the future of AI is thinking about how this is going to change the organizations and potentially how the society and different organizations, infrastructure, data, and application layers are going to evolve as a result of that.
We're living interesting times. I think it's going to be completely new software, so nimble and, like you were saying, very quick to adjust to business risks and signals, right? Hyper personal.
Signals, yeah. Opportunity is big.
Yeah.
We have to put the guardrails and data and AI governance, as well as the capabilities that we can measure the outcomes without slowing down the progress, as accelerators to the adoption so that we can responsibly innovate.
So true. Tendu, thank you so much. It was so much fun to speak with you today. I really, really appreciate it. Look
Thank you.
forward to see what else you're doing out there. You're always out there speaking. I hope people connect with you on LinkedIn. Is there another way that you'd like for them to reach out?
LinkedIn will be perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Vicky.